But we had 35 people from the United States, from Canada, and from Australia who've journeyed together. And we have seen some wonderful things in your schools. We've been very excited to do that. There is a lot of difference between our system and between yours. And I could take about 6 hours to unpack that with you, and I won't. But what I want to focus on more is some of the similarities. And so you received today this book, MindShift. There's a chapter in there on the Church of England schools and the journey you've been on, written by Andy Wolfs. I'd encourage you to take a look at that as a wonderful chapter. And so this is our group. And so the real thing that I want to point out that we all have in common is the question of what does it mean for a school to flourish? So whenever I go into a school, and I have thousands of schools in the United States and across the world, I always ask the head teacher, what keeps you up at night? I always ask that question. And those of you who are on the trip with me would have heard me ask that. And without skipping a beat, every head teacher said something relative to flourishing. Staying up at night, worrying, are my students flourishing? Was the decision that I made the right decision? Am I encouraging my staff and my faculty, my teachers, to really care for students, for young people? And will my students be able to be resilient in the face of challenges? Those types of questions. So that is universal. So again, I could spend 6 hours telling you how the system is different, but what is universal is that care and that desire for young people to flourish, and for us to flourish as well as we work with them. So what I'd like you to do is just take 20 seconds, turn to your neighbor, and I'd like you to ask them, what does it mean for a school to flourish? Go ahead. Okay, let me pull us back together. See, now that's the universal language right there. All right, there's my primary teachers and head teachers. And so what I'm going to share with you today is universal, but I want to share with you some scriptures just to give you a little bit of a scriptural background. Flourishing is certainly a very capacious word that speaks to what we do in education, but it also resonates in Scripture as well. So very quickly, Psalm 115, 114, may the Lord cause you to flourish, both you and your children. Jesus told his disciples, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. That's John 10:10b. You will have seen that in the vision document, right? I pray that your love will overflow more and more, and that you will keep on growing in knowledge and in understanding. That's Philippians 1:9, so that idea of growing. So fundamentally, we are designed to flourish as human beings. That is what God desires for us, and God desires that our communities, as we come together, would also be flourishing. This is very important because I think we live in such an age, and I'm going to read this in a minute, where we are judged on a zero-sum basis, right? And so you have a lot of the same pressures that we do. So schools, this is from a report that I'll share in a minute. Schools today exist in an era of heightened accountability for educational outcomes, measured almost exclusively via standardized testing. That's not the case here, right? That's only the United States, right? That's New York irony. Okay. Because of their faith foundation, Christian schools count academic achievement as a paramount aim, but not an exclusive one. In such an era, the concept of flourishing offers a more expansive view of the purposes and processes of education. So I'm assuming you're in this workshop because of this. I don't know if this is a fair assumption, but I've read through the evaluation schedule, and I find it fascinating that there's just one question that you need to answer, which is how effective is the school's distinctive Christian vision established and promoted by leadership at all levels in enabling pupils and adults to Flourish, right. So I'm assuming that might be why you're interested in being here, and I'm assuming that's why I was invited to speak, right? I hope. There's some coincidence there. So I'm actually going to share research with you today. I'm going to share a project that we did in the United States, and I'll tell you what ACSI is in a minute, but the Flourishing Schools research sought to understand how students, how educators, which I mean all the adults in the building, you have different words for that, and school communities flourish. We took about 3 years to do this research. We spent over $250,000 US to put this together through grants. And the website is up here. It's also on the handout. So what I would encourage you to do on your other time, obviously, is this national report is available for free. So you can actually go ahead and download this, and you'll be able to read in detail what I'm really going to have to skim through today. So I would encourage you to do that. So I want to tell you very quickly about ACSI. ACSI is the Association of Christian Schools International. I work for ACSI. My main responsibility is thought leadership and research. So this is where we have our school offices, our central offices all over the world. We have 2,400 schools in the United States. We have 25,000 schools worldwide, and we serve 5.5 million children around the world. So we're probably the largest evangelical Christian school organization that you've never heard of. But that's just a little bit of a background in terms of the reach that we have and the diversity of schools that we have really all over the world. So these were our research questions. The main question was, how do schools flourish? So what elements of school culture contribute to flourishing? And do some elements matter more than others? Does flourishing look different across different schools rather than a one-size-fits-all definition? I'll cheat on this and tell you the answer is yes. Every school flourishes in different ways. And so that's part of the difficulty. And by the way, I think we should encourage ourselves to talk about what we do the same way we talk with our students. I've heard really, really encouraging things in how we deal with children as people. And we say, you can flourish, you have capacity, God has given you gifts, we don't want to label you. I would push the envelope a little bit and say we need to do that also with ourselves as school communities, that we have strengths and unique gifts and things we need to work on, honestly. Can we develop a roadmap that's validated and a predictive model based in research to look at how schools flourish? And the answer to that is yes, we did. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. So there are probably some research geeks in the room. Just raise your hand if you love research and you can admit it. It's okay. Okay. I encourage you to read the national report. I'm going to have to really whip through this quickly to tell you how we did this. So we tested over 1,400 constructs related to flourishing. We use a 360 instrument that has an assessment piece for each of these audiences. So we talked to students in grades 6 through 12. I know that may or may not mean anything to you, but essentially 11 to 18. Teachers, school leaders, which you call head teachers, our staff, really important, your receptionists, your coaches, your cafeteria folks. Board members, it's kind of like your governors, your board of governors, parents, and alumni of schools. So this is who we talked to. We also were able to link it to student assessment data that we have for our school. So we did look at standardized testing. So what did we do? We had over 15,000 completed responses. This represented 280 24-hour days of response time. This is the largest study of its kind, certainly in the United States, certainly dealing with Christian schools, and probably even in any type of educational forefront, to look at over 15,000 responses from all of these diverse stakeholders. We had 65 diverse Christian school constituents. I have to take a quick second and tell you, I don't know how many of you are familiar, but the Christian schools in the United States are extremely diverse. Some of them are church-sponsored, some are not. They could be independent. Some have what we called an open admissions policy, which is any student can attend, which is probably, I would assume most of your schools are like that here, at least the ones we've seen. Some are what are called covenant-based, which is one parent needs to be a professing Christian and needs to sign off that they are indeed attending a church and so forth. It's very diverse. Some receive state funding from the form of school vouchers, and some are entirely privately funded. So we have a very diverse system there. So we had 65 diverse Christian schools in terms of format and structure, but also in terms of student population. We have small rural schools, we have big suburban schools, we have big urban schools, we have everything that you do here as well. 90% of our schools were accredited. This is similar to your Ofsted inspection process with SIAMs mixed in. So it's kind of like a salad, a lot of fun salad. And so 90% were. It is not compulsory or required in the United States, but 90% of the schools were involved with that. You can see the distribution here from all over the United States. We also had 6% come from international schools. Those are English-speaking schools outside of the United States. Unfortunately, no schools from the UK. Love to change that for the next time. Let me know if you want to do that. And our school size, you can see here, extremely diverse. We had everything. You can think of schools under 100. We had schools, just a really nice distribution, as was our visit to your country. We were able to see schools of all different sizes, which was wonderful. So this is the model. You have it on your seats. And then again, this is what emerged and what was validated through research. So there are 5 domains of flourishing that came out. And these are things that if we pay attention to these domains, and if we actually look at these things and work on them, they are predictive of flourishing for our students, for our educators, and for our school. Now, I don't know about any of you in the US, head teachers are extremely busy. That's not the case here, right? You don't have much to do? Okay. And so the question becomes, where do you put your attention? Where do you put your time? What can you do that will actually move the needle on flourishing in your school? And that is what this research is meant to help do. So the domains are purpose, relationships, learning orientation, expertise and resources, and well-being. And for the sake of time, I'm going to focus on 2. But I would encourage you to read the handout. So I'm going to focus on purpose and I'm going to focus on well-being. And those are 2 of the themes that I heard really resonate both in your schools when we visited and also throughout the conference here. So what I'd like you to do is turn to your neighbor and just read. If you look at this sheet, it's the second sheet, it's the white one, the back here, you'll see this grid. And in the middle, you'll see a description of each domain. So what I'd like you to do is, with your neighbor, just read the description of the first one, purpose. Go ahead and read that to each other. That starts a commitment. Okay. I don't know how quickly you read here, but you should probably be wrapping that up. Okay. So this is the description of this domain, and then you'll see the constructs that are validated by research that fit into these. I'm not going to go over all of them, but just to say that these are the things that make Christian schools deeply Christian. This is the distinctive. This is the purpose part. They're having a lot of fun in the next room. Shared responsibility for the school. So everyone has a responsibility for everyone else. Holistic teaching, not just teaching the head, but also the heart. Integrated worldview. This is understanding the Bible and being able to see the world through the lens of the Bible. The next 2 I love. The next 2 are student constructs. God's story, that students can see themselves as a part of God's story. They think there's a plan and a purpose to their life. They are created for a reason, right? They have the calling, as we heard today. And the other one is the other side of the same coin, which is questioning. So they have questions and doubts about faith. Sometimes they think Christians are too judgmental. They don't have time to read the Bible and pray. Now, only kids have that problem, right? No adults ever struggle with any of that. But I think this is the beautiful thing about educating an environment where we can have those conversations about spirituality and about faith, is we can mentor students on that journey. And it is their own journey, right? But we mentor them, and that's the beautiful thing about your schools, is you have the opportunity to get to those big questions. Partnership with parents and spiritual formation. So this is just an example of one of the domains. Relationships is very important. I'm sure that's pretty self-evident for most of us. Learning orientation for your school, expertise and resources. I do want to point out the bottom 3 here. There's resources, with just having enough to do what we need to do. Resource planning, we are good at thinking long-term about how we use our resources. And resource constraints. We heard this over and over again in your schools. You're very, very pressured financially. And we can commiserate because we also are in the United States. So how do you do more with less? And that is important. Everyone go ahead and read the bottom one to your neighbor, which this is the well-being one. It starts for both leaders and teachers. $15 minutes? Because I have like 10. I'll land the plane. It's good. Okay, we'll do it. Okay. This one is incredibly important, and I will tell you, I'll tell you why. I'm gonna get on a soapbox in a minute. You've been fully warmed. I don't know if you have soapboxes here, but I'm gonna get on one. Okay. So just to unpack this a little bit, the top construct is stress for educators, which I'll deal with in a second. The other two constructs are student related, so healthy living. And so where students are able to get enough exercise, rest, they eat well, they're physically healthy, we're actually able to predict that test scores in the school will be higher. And we have the data we talk about in the report. Resilience, and I know that's something that we're all very familiar with. This is that mental health piece, the social emotional learning piece, very important for students to be able to flourish. But I want to focus on the top one for a minute because I think it's something we talk about less, which is stress. And so for teachers, this looks like not having enough time to prepare, being overwhelmed. And for head teachers, school leaders, what this means is not having time to even take care of yourself physically. And I bet if we went around the room and I said, what does your exercise schedule look like? Do you eat lunch? Are you stressed in any way? I'm sure it would be through the roof. And so what we found in the research, and this is really important to note, is that these things are linked. You must have healthy educators, healthy teachers, healthy leaders. That impacts the quality of education in the classroom, and it impacts the experience of students. And I just want to quote somebody. I don't know if you all like C.S. Lewis over here. He's a pretty big guy in the States for Christians. So, none can give to another what he does not possess himself. No generation can bequeath to its successor what it has not got. Nothing which was not in the teachers can flow from them into the pupils. This is C.S. Lewis's God in the Dog. This is absolutely critical. And if you are a head teacher, I would urge you to think about your own well-being and the well-being of your staff and of your educators. It is time, because it is actually all those wonderful things, your vision that you want to implement, if you are not healthy and you are not well. And so that is a deep conversation to have in your school, right? That's a deep conversation. How do we build in time into our schedule? I know there was a session earlier about finding time for co-planning. How do you build your schedule so teachers can support one another? This is critical, and it has an impact on the flourishing of your students, of yourself, and of your school. I just want to share a couple of quotes, some responses to this research. So this is a large research project, but we also have individual schools that have gotten reports about their school that's specific to their school. So this is a quote from a head teacher. The report our school received was really helpful as we plan for the future of our school. We are using the information gleaned to ensure that our school doesn't just survive, but thrive. As a result of the study, we are paying closer attention to faculty stress levels and student anxiety levels. We wouldn't have known we were facing a potential problem without the research directed towards well-being that we gained. So that's one of my favorite responses that we got. But one of my really favorite responses is from, you may call this something different, but a school receptionist, the person who buzzes folks in and lets them in, right? And actually at this particular school, she's from London. So she's a wonderful British accent. So she would say hello if she knew that I was here. But this is the quote. So I went into her school and I spoke with them and I shared with them the results of the research. And just to hear the impact that this has on your staff when you talk about it. She wrote, I am not usually required to attend faculty work days, but I was required to come last Tuesday. I would have preferred to be home. So at least she was honest. However, I was so glad I came. Your presentation was inspiring and encouraging. Okay, that's great, but listen what she says. It was a reminder that we all impact the students and our school community. I was challenged to think of ways to be impactful in my work in the office. And so if you take nothing else away from this presentation, what I would say to you is please have deep conversations with your faculty and with your staff. Because we all know it's the receptionist, it's the cafeteria person that has that deep mentoring relationships with students. So what I'd like you to do is just take a couple minutes, which we delightfully have, and talk to the person next to you and say, how could I apply this research? And you have the handouts. How could I apply it in my context? I'm going to let you talk for 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to ask for some report back, because I'd love to hear, and I'd love for you to hear each other, what you're thinking about as you look at this research. So go ahead, just for a minute or two. Okay, let me pull us back together. See, I didn't know if you do the second round, but you do. Okay, great. Love to just hear, and I know we had the Secretary of State for Education here. We didn't want to keep him waiting. We don't want to keep the Archbishop of Canterbury waiting either. So it's quite a lot for me to say that in one sentence. As an American. But just some comments or feedback. Do you think that this applies in your setting? Does this resonate? How might you use this research? And let's just get at least 2 people, and then we can release you to go. Some feedback. If it resonates. Yes, please.
I was just saying that it would be interesting to take that to talk to the senior leadership team about how it resonates with them and what links we could make between our science framework and these ideas, and where those links are, and does it stimulate anything else in what we're doing.
That's wonderful. I think that's a great idea to take it back to your leadership and have those conversations. Let it stimulate the conversations and see if it could inform the science process. Great. I think I saw a hand. Yes?
I'm leading training on Tuesday in the Diocese of Peterborough on the science schedule. It's updates on science for this year. And the bottom one really resonated with me because I'm talking to governors and to heads about stress being a key factor that impacts flourishing. So I'm going to build some of this into my presentation. So
wonderful, wonderful. Maybe one last comment or thought, how you might use this in your school as you go back. Yes?
We were just talking about midday supervisors, so our lunchtime supervisors come in for 2 hours. And we were just saying it's the most vulnerable part of the day, the most unstructured, and what happens in those encounters. So we were looking at relationships and actually how sometimes that lunchtime doesn't go well, the knock-on it has for the afternoon and the senior leaders.
Right.
But it has to start with, do the mealtime supervisors feel valued?
Yes.
Are they being supported and loved enough to feel they're part of the community? How are they treated? Who actually says good morning or good welcome to school? So actually it needs to start with them being part in order for them to flourish, because actually we're giving them the most vulnerable part of the day. And where are all the leaders at that point of the day?
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you think about it from a spiritual perspective as well, the students are doing what? They're coming to table, right? And these people are serving them. And so do you all have the same view of this is a time for us to be in communion with one another, to be and to flourish together, just as we would hope we would in their households and in their church. So there's a lot of depth to this. So I want to personally invite you. My contact information is here. You can follow me on Twitter. Our group has been tweeting away all morning, as have many of you. Would love for you to stay in touch, answer any questions. We do video conferencing. That is a little technology we've discovered So would love to have further conversations with you. But the bottom line is to say thank you for opening your schools to us. It's been a wonderful week. Met some great colleagues and your students. So thank you.